The drive back to the city felt different from both Ethan and Claire. They were quiet, each lost in their own thoughts about the day they had just shared. Neither knew that those quiet moments would be the last time they would experience the world as a happy couple. The car slipped through the darkness, its headlights cutting through the shadows cast by tall trees lining the road. The silence between them wasn't awkward, but heavy with unspoken emotions that neither driver felt ready to discuss. Claire hummed softly to herself, tapping her fingers against the steering wheel. Her smile was still in place, but her eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. Ethan watched her profile, noticing the slight furrow in her brow, the way her shoulders slumped slightly, betraying the carefree air she exuded. He knew there were things she wasn't telling him, secrets that lurked beneath her laughter, casting shadows on the happiness they had displayed earlier in the day. Back at home, the unpacking began. Cardboard boxes were brought down, each holding mementos of a day that was now ending. The quiet murmur of voices filled the house as Ethan and Claire, along with a few helpers, organized their belongings. There was a sense of contentment, a feeling that they were creating the first chapter of their shared story. However, the walls of the house seemed to close in on Claire, and she found herself yearning for the open spaces of the reception hall. The noise that had once seemed joyful now sounded intrusive. Laughter echoed in her ears like a fading memory. As the house emptied of the helpers, Claire sank onto the sofa. Exhaustion tugged at her eyelids, but sleep evaded her grasp. She looked at Ethan, who was sorting through photographs. A deep weariness settled upon her. Suddenly, she realized that the life she had envisioned was not unfolding as she had planned. This realization was not a revelation, but a confirmation of a truth she had long known. This marriage was not based on love, but on convenience. She had entered this relationship willingly, driven by a need for stability and security that Ethan represented. In her mind, this union would shield her from the uncertainties of her past. But as the day drew to a close, she felt more exposed than ever before. Now that the celebrations were over and the reality of her situation sunk in, she understood that what she had done was not fix a problem, but become one. Ethan approached her, holding a glass of water. His eyes were filled with concern as he sat beside her. "You haven't touched your dinner," he said softly, his gaze gentle. Claire managed a weak smile. "I'm not hungry, just tired." But her voice lacked conviction. Ethan saw through her facade, sensing the turmoil beneath her calm exterior. He had noticed the fleeting glances, the nervous laughter, and now the quiet admission confirmed his suspicions. Taking her hand, he said, "Whatever is bothering you, you can talk to me." His tone was reassuring, but his words hung heavy with unspoken truths. Both knew that talking wouldn't solve anything. Claire pulled away her hand quickly, a defensive stance replacing her earlier charm. "There's nothing to worry about," she said hastily, trying to mask the tremor in her voice. "It's just a bit overwhelming. All of this," she gestured vaguely, hoping he wouldn't press further. But Ethan, usually so patient, felt a surge of frustration. He had given Claire everything: his determination, resources, and unwavering support, yet he sensed that she held something back. Trust was the cornerstone of their relationship, or at least it was supposed to be. And yet he couldn't shake off the feeling that she was living a double life, a secret lurking beneath her actions, keeping them from truly connecting. The weight of the lie settled upon them, casting a shadow over the hope of a future together. The silence stretched, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Claire stared at the floor, her mind racing. She needed a way out, a solution to the tangled web she had woven. But with each passing moment, the escape seemed more elusive. Ethan, sensing her internal struggle, decided to lay his cards on the table. "Claire," he began, his voice firm, "we need to talk about what's been happening lately. You've been distant, and I deserve an explanation." His words hung in the air, demanding a response. Claire looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and resentment. She had hoped Ethan would let things slide, that he wouldn't probe deeper. But his words pierced through her carefully constructed facade. Now she was trapped, unable to escape the consequences of her actions. "There's nothing to talk about," she retorted, attempting to regain her composure. "I'm fine." But her voice betrayed her, revealing the cracks in her carefully crafted facade. Ethan stood up, his face etched with frustration. "Don't lie to me," he said, his tone low. "I know something is wrong." Claire scrambled to her feet, her mind frantically searching for a way out. She had never been good at confrontation, But this time there was no one to blame but herself. Ethan took a step closer, his gaze intense. "Claire, if you're hiding something from me, it will destroy what we have built." His words were a warning, but also a prophecy. Claire's heart pounded in her chest, echoing the impending doom. She wanted to confess, to unload the burden she carried, but the fear of losing Ethan held her back. She had planned meticulously to this point, and now the very foundation of her carefully constructed life was crumbling. Ethan, seeing the turmoil in her eyes, softened his approach. But the damage was done. The trust that had bound them was fraying at the seams, threatening to tear them apart. The night deepened, and with it, the tension in the room grew. Claire felt trapped, the walls closing in. She knew she couldn't keep up the charade forever. The question was, what would happen when the truth finally came to light? What was the breaking point? How far could she push Ethan before he gave up on her? What would she do then? Claire's mind reeled with these questions, but there were no easy answers. The game she had played for so long was now threatening to consume her. And as the hours slipped by, she realized that the fairy tale ending she had envisioned was nothing but a mirage. Before the sun rose, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, Claire had made her decision. She would run, not just run away from Ethan, but from the life she had created, the lies, the deceit, and the suffocating expectations that had become her prison. But running wasn't just about escaping. It was about confronting the ghosts of her past, the ones she had tried so desperately to outrun. As dawn broke, she packed a small bag, leaving behind the remnants of a life that had imploded under the weight of its own deception. Every item she placed in the bag was a silent testament to the shattered dreams, the failed attempts at normalcy, and the relentless pursuit of a life less ordinary. The house, once filled with the echoes of celebration, was now eerily silent. The photographs on the wall seemed to mock her with their forced smiles, each image a reminder of the elaborate performance she had endured. The weight of the betrayal she had inflicted on Ethan pressed heavily on her conscience, yet the fear of his reaction kept her from turning back. Claire moved through the motions of her departure, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Guilt, fear, and a desperate hope for redemption warred within her, making each step a torment. As she slipped out of the house, the cool morning air sent a shiver down her spine. In that moment, she was both the hunted and the hunter, forever caught in a game of cat and mouse with her past. With the first light of dawn, she vanished into the city, leaving behind the life she had so painstakingly constructed. Her movements were swift, purposeful, driven by a primal instinct for survival. She navigated the crowded streets with the grace of a seasoned fugitive, her eyes constantly scanning, always alert. The bustling city was her refuge, its anonymity shielding her from the long arm of her past. Each step away from Ethan brought a mixture of relief and dread. Relief because she was further away from the suffocating grip of her old life, but dread because she knew that her freedom was a temporary reprieve. The past has a way of catching up, and hers was a long way from being over. Her cell phone was dead, so she stopped at a shop to get a new one. She paid in cash, aware that any digital transaction could lead back to her. Standing there with the new device in her hand, she was acutely aware of how fragile her freedom was. One wrong move, one traceable transaction, and the life she had left behind could come crashing down on her. She debated whether to change her number, but decided against it. Ethan would be looking for her, and changing her number would only make it harder for him to find her. Instead, she would hide in plain sight, using a false name and identity, hoping that Ethan would assume she had simply moved on. The woman walked out of the shop, stepping back into the bustling city. She was someone else now, or at least she intended to be. The city, with its towering buildings and endless crowds, seemed to offer her solace. She blended into the sea of faces, hoping that Ethan would believe he had lost her forever. But as she disappeared into the urban labyrinth, the city, too, became a trap, a gilded cage that confined her just as much as her old life had. The woman had traded one prison for another. "Hello, my name is Anonymous. I am a reporter from the city, and today I am here to talk to you about the case of the murdered bride and the groom who is accused of killing her. The case we're talking about today shocked our city. Everyone knows what happened because this was a very high-profile case. On the day of the wedding, there was a lot of coverage given to the local newspaper and the local news stations. So the whole city pretty much knows that this young bride, Claire, was found dead in the room that she was staying in on her wedding night. Her husband, Ethan, has been accused of murdering her. And so everyone's asking themselves why. Why did he do such a thing? What would cause somebody to kill somebody on their wedding night? This is a question that many people are asking. And for me, I think it really helps us get into the psychology of this particular case, the motive. We've already heard some information about the background of the case, right? We know that Ethan was a man who prided himself on his loyalty and honesty. He believes that love can survive anything, but loyalty is the single thread holding everything together. To him, trust was not just a word, but the foundation upon which every promise rested. He had worked tirelessly to build a life where betrayal had no place, and he never doubted that Claire felt the same way. Yet whispers had followed her long before the wedding, whispers that remained faint enough for Ethan to dismiss. She was admired for her beauty and charm, but with that admiration came rumors of late nights, questionable company, and secrets she never wanted to surface. These rumors had always lingered just outside Ethan's awareness, like shadows he chose not to chase. On the other hand, we also know that Claire was a free spirit, somebody who liked to have fun, and she started having an affair with another guy she met through friends during a night out. It was a reckless decision. She convinced herself would mean nothing, a fleeting distraction she thought she could bury forever. Each time she saw Ethan, she told herself that the affair was behind her, that it would vanish into silence as if it never happened. So we have two people here who each have a secret. We have Ethan, who is suspicious of Claire's behavior, thinking that she may be unfaithful to him. And we have Claire, who is hiding the affair that she's having with another man. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because whenever we look at any kind of violent crime, whether it's murder or sexual violence or domestic violence, we often want to ask ourselves, why did this happen? Why did this person do this thing? And we usually look at the motive as being one of the most important parts of understanding why a crime happens. And in this particular case, the motive, what drives the characters to behave the way they do, is key. So we know that Ethan thinks that Claire might be unfaithful. We also know that Claire is trying to hide the affair that she's having with somebody else. But ultimately, the idea that Claire might be cheating on Ethan isn't just a suspicion, it's an obsession. Ethan becomes so fixated on the idea that Claire may be cheating on him that it makes him crazy. And the fact that Claire is hiding the affair only serves to increase his paranoia. She thinks that she can hide it. She thinks that she can get away with it. But it will all eventually come out. And when it comes out, it will destroy the relationship. Ultimately, this is what leads to the confrontation and the murder. But how exactly does this work psychologically? Well, I think the best way to understand it is to look at Ethan's perspective. Let's imagine that we're inside his head. What does he believe? Well, he believes that love is everything. If he loves Claire, that should be enough. That should be the only thing that matters. And if Claire loves him back, then she will be loyal to him. She will be honest with him. And if she isn't, well, then he is justified in doing whatever it is he needs to do. Because if she betrays him, if she is not faithful to him, then their whole relationship is based on a lie and there is nothing left to do but end it. In addition to this, we also need to remember that Ethan is an ambitious guy. He's got a lot going for him. He's successful. He's talented. And the idea that he would be rejected by Claire, the idea that their relationship would fall apart, would be absolutely devastating to him. And so instead of allowing that to happen, he takes matters into his own hands. So when the message comes on the day of the wedding, it drives him crazy. And we know that because of the narrative that tells us that his heartbeat quickens, that he reads it again and again, that he cannot stop his mind from circling back to it. It consumes his thoughts. And so in that moment, he decides that he needs to know the truth. He needs to confront Claire and find out what is going on. But he doesn't. He holds back. Why does he hold back? Well, he holds back because he wants to maintain the facade. He wants to make sure that everybody thinks that their relationship is perfect. He doesn't want anybody to know that he suspects that Claire is cheating on him. He wants to maintain the appearance of their relationship. He wants to protect his own reputation, and this is a classic example of what we refer to as cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is a psychological phenomenon that occurs when we hold two or more contradictory beliefs, ideas, or values. And this creates a state of mental discomfort. And in order to reduce that discomfort, we are motivated to change one of our attitudes or behaviors. In this case, Ethan believes that he loves Claire and that their relationship is strong and healthy. But he also suspects that she is cheating on him. These two beliefs are contradictory, and therefore he experiences cognitive dissonance. In order to reduce that dissonance, he could choose to confront Claire and get to the bottom of his suspicions, but that would require him to acknowledge that his perfect relationship might actually be a lie, and he's not willing to do that. Instead, he chooses to ignore his suspicions and go along with the charade, burying his discomfort under the weight of maintaining the perfect image of their relationship. And this is a dangerous game to play because by refusing to acknowledge the truth, he allows his suspicions and his anger to grow unchecked. And eventually, on the night of the wedding, after seeing the message, his suspicions turn into a consuming obsession. The image of Claire with another man flashes before his eyes. The affair he had never confronted takes shape in his mind, and his love turns to rage. The facade he had carefully constructed crumbles, and he is left standing in the wreckage of his shattered perception. The consequences of his actions are swift and brutal. In the heat of his obsession, he acts without thinking, driven by the need to punish the woman he believes has betrayed him. And when the dust settles, he is left to face the horror of his actions, the bride he vowed. In the aftermath of such a horrific crime, many questions arise. How could someone commit such an act of violence? What drove them to take another person's life? But amidst these questions, there is often one question that stands out above all others, and that is, why did he wait so long to call the police? Why did he keep it hidden? And what was going through his mind during those crucial moments? We're going to answer those questions right now, so stay tuned. If you don't know anything about the case I'm referring to, let me catch you up first. The year was 2013 and a grand wedding was being planned. On June 8th, Ethan Cushman, a young man deeply in love with his fiancée Claire, celebrated their marriage surrounded by friends and family. They danced, they laughed, and they exchanged heartfelt vows promising to love each other for the rest of their lives. The following morning after the wedding, Ethan woke up feeling the magic of the previous night's celebration fade away, replaced by the harsh glare of reality. His gaze fell upon a message on his phone that shattered the remnants of the fairy tale, revealing Claire's infidelity. Overwhelmed by shock and rage, he confronted his wife, leading to a heated argument. Unable to cope with the revelation, Ethan lost control and strangled Claire to death. You may be asking yourself, how could something so horrible happen? The couple had just got married and were supposed to be on their honeymoon. Well, sometimes when a relationship seems perfect, it's hiding a lot of secrets. When we see the picture-perfect weddings and smiling faces of couples, we often don't realize the storms that may be brewing beneath the surface. Sometimes the cracks are deeper than what meets the eye. That's exactly what happened with this couple. Their marriage wasn't as rosy as everyone thought, and there were problems lurking in the shadows. Claire was having an affair with another man behind Ethan's back, and when Ethan found out about the betrayal, it pushed him over the edge, destroying the trust and love that once bound them together. It's important to remember that while outward appearances can be deceiving, each relationship has its own story. It is a reminder for us to pay attention to the signs and to be there for each other, especially in challenging times. But why didn't Ethan immediately call the police? It is a puzzling question that keeps us up at night wondering about the motives and thoughts of the perpetrator. After committing the heinous act, Ethan did not flee the scene, nor did he try to hide evidence or seek help. Instead, he waited 11 hours before informing the authorities, which raises a significant, why did he wait? During those 11 hours, while the rest of the world slept peacefully, unaware of the tragedy unfolding in that hotel suite, Ethan grappled with a myriad of emotions: fear, guilt, confusion, and perhaps even regret. One possible explanation for his delay in calling the police is the shock he experienced immediately after the incident. In those immediate moments, he might have been in a state of disbelief, unable to comprehend the gravity of what he had just done. Or maybe he was overwhelmed with the suddenness of the situation, caught off guard by the intensity of his own actions. Some cases show that people sometimes do things in a heat of the moment and don't realize the consequences of their actions until much later. Another reason is that he was afraid of the consequences. In the aftermath of such a traumatic event, it's natural for someone to fear the repercussions of their actions. Ethan may have been terrified of the legal ramifications, societal judgment, or the emotional turmoil his actions would bring to his family and friends. In that moment of fear, calling the police could have seemed like admitting to a horrifying crime, sealing his fate and separating him from the only life he had ever known. You see, when we make mistakes, especially big ones, it's easy to get scared. Our brains sometimes trick us into thinking the best solution is to hide what we've done. But hiding problems never makes them go away. It just makes them worse. Moreover, Ethan may have initially believed that the police wouldn't believe his account of events, leading him to assume that calling them would only make matters worse. Perhaps he hoped that without his involvement, the truth of the situation would eventually come to light, allowing him to avoid the legal system's scrutiny. This could have been a misguided attempt to protect himself or a desperate attempt to preserve the memory of his late wife without the interference of law enforcement. However, by waiting 11 hours to come forward, Ethan only compounded his crime. It gave the appearance that he was attempting to hide his involvement in Claire's death, further incriminating himself. What is even more mind-boggling is that he actually called Clary's parents to inform them of their daughter's death, telling them that he had found her dead in their room. He didn't mention that he was the reason behind their daughter's untimely demise. The reason behind his actions remains unclear. Why did he tell Claire's parents but not the police? Did he feel guilty and wanted to spare them the trauma of finding out from the media? Or was he still in shock and struggling to grasp the magnitude of the situation himself? Upon arriving at the scene, the police found Ethan seated in a chair beside Claire's lifeless body, appearing disheveled and distressed. Despite the shocking nature of the discovery, officers maintained professionalism, immediately placing Ethan under arrest and launching an investigation. They treated him as a person of interest rather than a grieving widower, recognizing the need to gather evidence and reconstruct the events leading to Claire's death. With careful precision, they examined the crime scene, documenting every detail and collecting forensic evidence. They searched for clues that could shed light on the motive behind such a tragic crime, seeking to understand the sequence of events that unfolded in the hours leading up to Claire's death. Meanwhile, Ethan was questioned, providing his account of the incident. His demeanor, statements, and overall conduct were scrutinized as investigators worked diligently to piece together the puzzle of Clary's untimely demise. However, during the investigation, it became clear that Ethan had attempted to conceal certain aspects of the crime scene, raising suspicions and prompting further scrutiny. Investigators noticed inconsistencies in his story, which ultimately led to his confession. When someone you love dies suddenly, it can be devastating and overwhelming. Grief can bring up a whirlwind of intense emotions, making it difficult to think clearly and make rational decisions. It's common to experience a range of complex feelings, including sadness, guilt, anger, and a sense of loss. These emotions can be all-consuming, clouding our judgment and impairing our ability to function. Moreover, when facing the death of a loved one, many people grapple with feelings of guilt. They might blame themselves for not doing enough or wonder if there was something they could have done differently to prevent the tragedy. This guilt can intensify if there are unanswered questions or unresolved conflicts within the family. Additionally, the stress and trauma associated with the death of a loved one can significantly impact our mental and emotional well-being. It can trigger or exacerbate pre-existing mental health conditions such as anxiety or depression, leading to a sense of overwhelming despair and hopelessness. It's important to acknowledge and process these emotions, but seeking support from friends, family, or mental health professionals is crucial during such difficult times. Remember, you're not alone and help is available. This case serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of deception and the importance of fostering open communication and trust in relationships. If you're enjoying this video and want to hear similar true stories, don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching. Morning had turned into midday when a housekeeper approached the bridal suite, expecting to tidy up after a night of celebration. She knocked several times, received no answer, and finally opened the door with caution. What she saw made her scream so loudly that guests in nearby rooms came rushing into the hallway. Within minutes, the hotel was in chaos, and the police had been called. The scene inside the suite was unlike anything the staff had ever encountered. The roses and champagne now seemed grotesque beside the body of the bride, her wedding gown folded neatly nearby, as though mocking the horror of her fate. The air was heavy with silence, except for the sound of officers moving carefully through the room, their cameras flashing as they documented every detail. Ethan was found sitting near the bed, his face pale, his hands shaking. He did not resist when officers placed him in handcuffs, his gaze distant as though he was no longer connected to the world around him. To the police, it was immediately clear that this was not an accident. There were signs of violence, marks that told a story of rage, and no evidence of intrusion. The groom, dressed still in the remnants of his wedding attire, was the only one who could have been responsible. He was taken away quietly, but by then the hotel was already surrounded by flashing lights and reporters eager to uncover the story that was about to shock the entire community. Days later, the news was everywhere, blaring from television sets and dominating online discussions. Headlines screamed the unthinkable: a bride found dead on her wedding night, a groom in custody. People shook their heads in disbelief. The story was like something out of a movie, too dramatic, too bizarre to be real. Yet here it was, splashed across newspapers and websites, pulling the world into a tragedy that had played out behind closed doors. Photographs appeared, pictures of the happy couple from the reception, from the ceremony, from their engagement party. Each image was a fresh stab of pain for those close to the case, a constant reminder of the shattered dreams and broken lives. Faces that had smiled for the camera now stared back with haunted eyes. The bride, her beauty frozen in time, her laughter echoing in memory. The groom, his charm now tainted, his future uncertain. Every detail became fodder for speculation, every word uttered by family members or guests scrutinized and debated. Rumors swirled, theories multiplied, and the simple story of a wedding night turned murder became a tangled web of conjecture and accusations. With each passing day, more stories emerged, adding layers to the mystery and deepening the enigma. Friends spoke of Claire's kindness, her spirit, her ability to light up a room with her infectious joy. They recalled her dreams for the future, her hopes for a family, her plans for a life shared with the man she had chosen. Ethan's friends described him as steadfast, dependable, the kind of person who kept his promises and faced challenges head-on. They talked about his deep affection for Claire, how he had been planning this wedding for months, poring over every detail to make it perfect for her. The stark contrast between their personalities became a puzzle for many, how two people so different could have found love and made a life together. As the investigation continued, the focus narrowed, the spotlight falling squarely on the relationship at the center of it all. Was it love that had bound them or something else entirely? What secrets had they shared? What dreams had they woven together? And most importantly, how could such a perfect union have ended in such unspeakable violence? In the midst of all the speculation, the truth lay hidden, waiting to be uncovered. It was in the quiet moments, when the noise of the crowd faded away and the glare of the media spotlight dimmed, that the pieces of the puzzle began to fit together. This was not merely a tale of a troubled marriage, a story of domestic discord or a crime of passion. This was a carefully constructed narrative of deceit, obsession, and the destructive power of betrayal. Hidden beneath the surface of a seemingly perfect wedding was a story as old as time, a story of forbidden love and its devastating consequences. As the sun set on the first day of the trial, casting long shadows across the courtroom, one question echoed in the minds of the spectators: what drove a man to murder on his own wedding night? The next morning, the courtroom was filled to capacity. Cameras were set up, microphones in place, and a hushed anticipation fell over the room as Judge Harper entered and took his seat. The prosecution began their case, presenting a timeline of events that led to the tragic demise of Claire. They painted a picture of a devoted bride, a loving daughter, and a loyal friend, a young woman whose life had been brimming with potential. The defense, however, offered a different perspective, portraying Claire as a deceitful partner, someone who had betrayed her husband's trust and shattered the foundation of their marriage. They suggested that Ethan's actions were those of a man pushed to the edge, a man who had discovered his wife's infidelity and reacted in a moment of uncontrollable anger. As the trial progressed, the focus narrowed to a pivotal moment during the reception, a moment when Ethan had confronted Claire with the evidence of her affair, a heated exchange that promised to redefine their relationship forever. But why did he wait until late at night to take action? Why not confront Claire immediately? The answer lay in the heart of the case, buried beneath layers of deceit and manipulation. Ethan's reaction to discovering the affair was not immediate. He needed time to absorb the truth, to grapple with the betrayal, and to devise a plan that would allow him to exact the ultimate revenge. His actions, far from being a spontaneous outburst of rage, were calculated, methodical, and chillingly precise. It was not just about ending the affair. It was about ending Claire's life. The trial exposed the depths of Ethan's obsession, revealing a side to him that no one had ever witnessed. He had not been content with simply confronting Claire. He had stalked her, monitored her movements, and planned his attack meticulously. But what was the nature of his obsession? How did he transform from a devoted husband to a cold-blooded killer? The answer lay in the very fabric of their relationship, woven with threads of control, possessiveness, and a desperate need for domination. From the moment Ethan had met Claire, he had been captivated by her, not just because of her beauty or charm, but because he saw in her a chance to possess something he had always desired: absolute control. Their relationship was not based on mutual love and respect, but on Ethan's need to dominate and Claire's willingness to submit. He had fallen in love with the idea of love, with the fantasy of a perfect marriage, and he was willing to do whatever it took to preserve that illusion. The revelation of Claire's affair shattered the facade, exposing the raw, unfiltered version of their relationship. Ethan's obsession had transformed into a consuming rage, a burning desire to punish his wife for her perceived betrayal. The thought of her intimate moments with another man ignited a violent reaction within him, a reaction that would culminate in the early hours of the morning. The defense argued that Ethan's actions were those of a man driven to the edge, consumed by the pain of betrayal and overwhelmed by a sudden, uncontrollable rage. However, the prosecution saw things differently. They argued that Ethan's behavior was not that of a man pushed beyond his limits, but that of a man who had planned his actions deliberately, methodically, and with chilling precision.